Morning, everyone. It is really such an honor to be here today with all of you. I was so moved by the beginning, by the blessing, and by the chant. And I really want to thank you, Anne, for organizing this, and everyone who's participating this morning, whether physically or virtually, for joining us. I came to the United States in 1979. I was 16 years old, and I came here to go to college. And reflecting my lack of understanding of immigration history in the United States, I thought that I was part of the vanguard of South Asians to come to the United States. It really wasn't until recently that I realized that there was a much, much earlier wave in the early 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s, of South Asians from the Punjab region of India who came to the United States, mostly to the West Coast, worked in lumber mills and in agriculture up and down the West Coast from Canada to Washington to Oregon to California. And in fact, here in Portland, in what was then the independent town of St. John's, there was a community of Punjabi, Indian, primarily from the Sikh faith, workers in the lumber mills of St. John's. And in March of 1910, one evening at about 7:30, those workers, and there were several dozen of them, were rousted from their beds, were thrown out of windows, were put on trains, and run out of town. And they came back. They eventually came back and they fought. But this was a reminder to me that we have been here, all of us, for centuries. And it was a reminder that this violence that we've seen isn't new. It is not new to this country. It's not new to Portland. It's not new to this region. And it has its roots in a history of racist systems, a history of colonialism and imperialism overseas, and a history of domestic policies, domestic racist policies right here at home. It isn't accidental that most of the people killed in Atlanta were Asian women, were low-wage workers, were immigrants. Our Asian communities hold enormous reservoirs of strength and resilience rooted in family, faith, and tradition. But that history of systemic racism, barriers to economic mobility, low wages and working conditions, barriers to mental and physical health care, all these things render our communities more vulnerable to this violence. I'm so proud of Multnomah County's declaration of racism as a public health crisis. That declaration reaffirms the county's commitment to eradicating racist policies and practices from our own systems, and our commitment to devoting the attention and the resources necessary to redressing the historic and present impacts of those racist policies and practices. This includes implementation of the Preschool for All ballot measure, which will support all families in Multnomah County, but will be particularly transformative for low-income families and families of color. It includes our work to ensure that COVID vaccination and related services are reaching Asian communities in culturally appropriate and effective ways, and includes supporting culturally specific organizations like the Asian Health and Services Center and the Asian Family Center, both of which support and serve Asian elders and families. Access to mental health care is an area in which Asian communities face particular disparities. Many of those in our refugee communities in particular arrive carrying the trauma of war and violence, trauma that's exacerbated when the country they thought would keep them safe, the United States, proves not to be. They need support that promotes mental health and healing, and so that's an area in which we'll continue to focus attention and resources. Finally, a few words about the category of Asian, and I take every opportunity to talk about this. Asian communities are incredibly diverse. That category comprises hundreds of languages and ethnicities, dozens of countries of origin, and a myriad of circumstances in which we arrived in the United States, and those circumstances can make all the difference. That diversity is one of our greatest assets, but when we lump all those communities together in the category of Asian, it hides the needs of specific communities. I have advocated for, and the county chair's executive budget includes, a mapping study to strengthen county services to immigrant and refugee communities. This will support our anti-racist public health work by documenting the diversity and the specific needs of our Asian and other immigrant communities in Multnomah County, which in turn will result in more relevant, culturally specific services for our aunties, our elders, our children, and our families. Thank you again for being here, whether virtually or physically. Thank you for standing with us. Thank you for standing against bigotry and hate. Together we are resilient. Together we are strong. Together, in the words of that wonderful blessing, we can create a Multnomah County in which our children are surrounded by beauty and harmony, and where all of us will thrive. Thank you.